Hello, Pack 2 years is a long time to keep a fire burning for someone who left without a date of return. Marin had done it anyway. She had buried his father, held court in his chair, negotiated 3 border treaties he had been too far away to sign, and kept the wolves of Ironhold fed through the worst winter the northern reaches had seen in a generation. She had done all of it alone, with no title that the council fully recognized, and no promise that he was coming back. Kaelen walked through the gates on a Tuesday in the rain, with blood on his collar and 2 men she didn't recognize at his back. He looked like someone had taken the man she remembered and worn him down to the essential parts. Harder, quieter, the jaw the same, the eyes different. She was in the middle of a council session when they told her he'd arrived. She finished the session first. Let's begin the day Kaelen left. There had been no ceremony. That was the thing Marin remembered most clearly later, when she was trying to reconstruct what had happened and why it had felt so final even when he told her it wasn't. He had come to her in the early morning, before the hall was lit, and he had stood in the doorway of the scriptorium where she was already working. She had always been an early riser, a fact he'd catalogued with the particular attention he gave to things he wasn't ready to name, and he had said quietly that the Eastern Coalition was moving, that the High Council of the Reaches had invoked the old compact, that he had to go. She had looked up from the manuscript she was preserving. "How long?" she had said. "I don't know." She had filed that away, the not knowing, the way he'd said it, flat and final, the way he said most things, but with a fraction more stillness than usual, as though the words had been weighed and found inadequate, and set down anyway because there were no better ones. "The pack," she had said. "You know how it runs." She had. She had been learning it for 8 months by then. The rhythms of Ironhold, the council's pressure points, the names of the wolves who ran the southern border, and the ones who needed a firm hand in the northern garrison. She had learned it because he had shown her quietly without ever formally explaining why. And she had learned it because she was the kind of person who learned things she might need. "Your father," she had said, "is not well. He knows." A pause. "He asked for you." She had nodded. She had not asked him to stay. She had not asked when he would be back a second time, because the first answer had been honest, and she respected honest answers even when they were the wrong ones. She had set down her pen and walked him to the gate herself, because someone had to, and when he turned at the threshold, she had held still and let him look at her in that way he had, the gray eyes going quieter than usual, the jaw set, and then he had gone. The gate had closed. She had gone back to the scriptorium and finished the manuscript. 3 days later, his father had a second collapse, worse than the first, and Marin had sat with him through the night and held his hand while the healers worked, and listened to him talk about Kaelen as a boy, a young man, the weight of a throne passed down through blood, and what it cost a man to carry it. He had died before morning, quietly, the way some large things end, not with noise, but with a kind of settling, as though the body had simply decided it was finished. She had buried him. She had organized the ceremony, stood at the graveside, spoken the words the pack law required. The council had been present, all 7 of them, and they had watched her with the particular careful attention of men who were deciding whether to be threatened. She had not looked at them while she spoke. She had looked at the grave. Afterward, Elder Voss had come to find her in the great hall, where she was already reviewing the border reports that had arrived that morning. "The king is unreachable," he had said, his voice smooth and precise, in the way of men who had spent decades making careful enunciation into a weapon. "The pack requires governance." "Yes," she had said. "You understand your position here is functional," she had said, without looking up. "I understand that. Let's talk about the northern garrison." He had paused. A long pause, the kind that was meant to communicate something about hierarchy. She had let it communicate whatever it needed to, and continued reading. "The northern garrison," he had said finally, "is understaffed. I need 2 more men on the pass before the first snow, If you'd like to discuss the formal question of my title, we can do that after. But the snow won't wait for the council's comfort. Voss had sat down. They had discussed the northern garrison. That was how it had started. The first winter was the hardest. Not because of the cold. Marin had grown up in the Iron Hills, she knew cold. But because of the particular quality of governing a pack that was not formally hers, in the name of a king who was not formally present, under the watch of a council that was perpetually deciding whether to accept her authority or contest it. She held court in Kaelen's chair because there was no other chair and the pack needed someone in it. She signed documents as his regent, a title Voss had eventually conceded was accurate, if not ideal. She learned the names of the children born that winter and attended the funerals of the old wolves who died in it, and she kept the fire in the great hall burning because it mattered to the pack to see it burning, and because some things were worth doing for symbolic reasons, even when you were too tired to feel them. She did not hear from Kaelen. She had sent 3 messages through the Eastern Courier Network. The first had gone unanswered. The second had come back with a brief acknowledgement, 3 lines in his hand, flat and spare, confirming he had received it and that the coalition negotiations were ongoing. The third had gone unanswered again. She had filed all 3 responses, the 2 silences and the 1 sparse confirmation. In the same place she filed most things she couldn't resolve, somewhere in the back of her mind, behind the immediate work, available for later examination. She had not let herself examine them yet. The second year was different, not easier, but different. By then, she had the shape of the work. She knew which council members could be moved by logic and which by precedent, and which by the particular political pressure of a decision that had already been publicly made and would cost them more to reverse than to accept. She knew the pack's rhythms well enough to feel when something was wrong before anyone reported it, the way you learn to read a building's sounds when you've lived in it long enough. She knew the wolves by name. They knew her. That was the thing she had not expected, not the authority. She had understood that authority could be built, slowly, through consistency and competence, and the willingness to show up when things were hard. What she had not expected was the particular quality of being known by a pack, the way the wolves in the courtyard began to settle when she crossed it, the way the children ran to tell her things, the way old Aldrich, who ran the southern border, had started ending his reports with a line about how the pack was holding, as though he understood that she needed to hear it. She had been holding them. They had been holding her back. She was in the middle of a council session, the 3rd Wednesday of the month, the regular review of border reports and supply tallies, when the door opened and one of the gate guards stepped in, rain-damp and slightly out of breath. "He's back," the guard said. The council went very still. Marin finished the sentence she had been speaking about the eastern grain supply and the new rate the Vale Territory traders had offered. Then she set down her pen. "Tell him I'll be out shortly," she said. "Ask Aldrich to meet him at the gate." The guard blinked. It's the king, my lady." "I know who it is," she said. "Tell him I'll be out shortly." She finished the session. It took 23 minutes. She was aware, distantly, of the particular quality of the council's attention during those 23 minutes, the way Voss kept very still and the way the younger members kept glancing at the door. And she noted it and set it aside and finished the session because the grain supply rate required a decision before end of week, and the decision was more important than the symbolism of dropping everything. When she walked out into the courtyard, the rain was still coming down. Kaelen was standing near the gate, talking to Aldrich in a low, spare way he had. He was taller than she'd remembered, or maybe she just stopped picturing him at full height. He had a cut above his left eyebrow that had been stitched recently and not particularly well. His coat was the wrong weight for the weather. The 2 men with him were hanging back, reading the courtyard with the careful eyes of people who had learned to assess unfamiliar territory quickly. He saw her before she reached him. He went still. She had catalogued his tells. Once, in the early months, when she was still learning the particular language of a man who communicated almost entirely through increments of stillness. The jaw setting, the gray eyes going quieter, the way his hands, when he was working something out, would come flat against whatever surface was nearest. She had catalogued them, and then, at some point during the first winter, she had stopped cataloging and simply known them, the way you stop consciously reading a language and begin to just understand it. She watched him go still, and she read it, and she kept walking. "You're back," she said when she reached him. Yes, he looked at her in that way, the full attention, the gray eyes taking inventory. "You finished the session." The grain rate needed a decision. Something shifted in his expression. "Not much, just a fraction. My father," he said, 8 months ago, I sent word. I received it. I'm sorry I couldn't." "I know," she said. "I buried him properly. He had a good death. I'll tell you about it when you're dry." He looked at her for a long moment. The rain was coming down steadily between them, and the courtyard wolves had gone quiet in the way they did when something significant was happening, the way she had learned to read as the pack's version of holding its breath. "The council," he said, "is in the hall. They know you're here." She paused. "Voss will want a meeting today. I'd suggest tomorrow morning. You need food and sleep, and that cut needs to be properly dressed. Marin." "It's a reasonable sequence," she said, "unless the Eastern situation requires immediate." "It doesn't. Then tomorrow morning." He was looking at her with something she couldn't immediately name. Not the flat, controlled expression she remembered. Something that had more texture to it, more layers, as though the 2 years had worn down some of the smooth surface and left the material underneath more visible. "You held it," he said. Quiet. "Not quite a question." "I did," she said. She turned and walked back toward the hall. After a moment she heard his footsteps behind her. She did not look back to check. She had the healers sent to his rooms that evening, and a meal, and she made sure the fire in the great hall was built up before she went to her own chambers. She sat at her desk for a while in the dark, not working, which was unusual for her. She was aware of the particular quality of the night, the rain still going, the fortress settling into its evening sounds, and she was aware that something had shifted in the shape of things, the way a room changes when furniture is moved back to where it used to be, and you can suddenly see the marks it left on the floor. She had known he would come back. She had governed as though he would come back, held the structure intact for his return, made decisions she had framed as temporary even when they had felt permanent. She had done all of it with a kind of deliberate, forward-facing attention that had not left much room for the question of what would happen when he actually walked through the gate. Now he had. She picked up her pen, set it down, picked it up again. She filed the question away for morning. He came to find her before morning. She heard the footsteps in the corridor. She knew the sound of this fortress in the dark, every creak and echo. She had learned it the way you learn a language you live in, and she recognized the particular weight of them. She was still at her desk when the door opened. She had not gone to bed. He stood in the doorway. He had changed out of the traveling coat, and someone had properly dressed the cut above his eyebrow. He looked in the lamplight like himself and not himself simultaneously, the familiar architecture of him, the jaw and the shoulders, and the way he took up space in a room, as though the room had been built around him, but something in the eyes that was different. The 2 years were in the eyes. "You're awake?" he said. "I'm usually awake at this hour." I know he came in, without being invited, which was also familiar. He stood near the window, not sitting looking out at the rain-wet courtyard below. "I walked the garrison tonight, and it's better than when I left. The northern pass needed 2 more men before the first snow," she said. "I told Voss in September. He argued for 6 weeks, and then conceded when the first scouts reported ice on the upper road. He told me in his message that the garrison had been reinforced. He didn't mention who argued for it." "No," Kaelen said. "He didn't. The silence stretched. Outside, the rain was easing, the particular quality of it shifting from steady to intermittent, and the courtyard below was empty and wet and lit by 2 torches that she had insisted on keeping through the night, because the pack needed to see the fortress lit. "The council will try to reassert full governance tomorrow," she said. "Voss has been patient because he had no choice, but your return gives him the opening he's been waiting for. He'll move quickly. I know how Voss operates. You know how he operated 2 years ago? He's had time to build." She paused. "He has 3 of the 7 with him, possibly 4. The younger members are less certain. They've seen how the pack runs under the current arrangement, and are not sure they want to disrupt it. But Voss will frame it as a restoration of proper order, and that framing is difficult to argue against without seeming to argue against you." Kaelen turned from the window. He looked at her with that full attention, again the kind that had always felt like being read rather than seen. "You've been watching him," he said. "I've been governing alongside him for 2 years. Yes, I've been watching him. And you're telling me this now, at," he glanced toward the window, "past midnight, because you want me prepared before morning. I'm telling you this now because it's relevant, and because you should sleep on it, and because I've had 2 years to think about how tomorrow should go, and you've had approximately 6 hours. She met his eyes. "I'm not trying to manage you." "I know," he said, and then after a moment, "You could have, though, managed it differently, handed it back when I walked through the gate, let the council take the reins, stepped out of the way." "I could have," she agreed. "Why didn't you?" She looked at him for a long moment. The lamp between them was burning low, the kind of low that meant she should have replaced the oil an hour ago, and hadn't, because she'd been thinking. "Because the pack is not a set of keys you hand back," she said. "It's a living thing. You don't pass it from hand to hand without cost. I've been holding it carefully for 2 years, and I intend to keep holding it carefully until we've had a proper conversation about what happens next, and what I am here, and what you want this to look like. And I'm not having that conversation tonight." The silence that followed was a different quality than the ones before it. Not the comfortable silence of 2 people who had run out of things to say, but the charged kind, the kind that happened when something true had been said, and both people were sitting with the weight of it. "What you are here," he said slowly, as though each word had been picked up and examined before being set down. "Yes, I left without. You left without a great number of things," she said. "I managed. I'm not asking for an accounting of that tonight. I'm telling you that tomorrow, when Voss moves, you should know what you're walking into and what you want to say about the current structure of governance before he frames it for you." She paused. "That's all." He looked at her for another long moment. Then he nodded once, the way he nodded when he had received information he intended to use. "Tomorrow morning," he said, 9 o'clock, before Voss requests an audience." He moved toward the door, stopped at the threshold. "Marin." She waited. "You held it," he said again. The same words as the courtyard, but different. The courtyard version had been observation. This one was something else. "Go to sleep, Kaelen," she said. He went. She sat at her desk for another hour, not working, and then she went to bed. The council session the next morning was, as she had predicted, a careful exercise in political architecture. Voss arrived at 5 minutes before 9, which was itself a statement. He had been waiting for her to set a time so he could arrive just before it, claiming the room before the meeting was formally called. She had expected this and arrived at 8:45. When he walked in, she was already at the table, reviewing the border reports from the past week, and Kaelen was standing at the window. Voss paused, almost imperceptibly, at the sight of them both already present. "Alpha King," he said, inclining his head. "It is a relief to see you return safely." "Elder Voss," Kaelen said. "Sit down." Voss sat. The other council members filed in over the next several minutes, and Marin watched each of them read the room, the two of them already present, the particular quality of the arrangement, and file their own assessments away. The session began with the formal matters: the Eastern Coalition's current status, the border reports, the supply situation for the coming winter. Kaelen handled these with the flat, precise efficiency she remembered, asking the right questions, receiving answers, moving forward. The 2 years had not blunted his ability to read a room. If anything, they had sharpened it. Voss waited until the formal matters were concluded. "There's the question," he said carefully, "of governance structure. Now that the Alpha King has returned, it would be appropriate to review the arrangements that were made in his absence." "The arrangements worked," said Fenwick, one of the younger council members. He said it plainly, the way young people sometimes said true things before they learned to be careful about timing. Voss did not look at him. "Arrangements made under extraordinary circumstances are not always appropriate for ordinary ones. The pack benefits from clarity of authority. The pack has had clarity of authority for 2 years, Marin said. I held court, signed the treaties, managed the garrison, and buried the former king. If there was a lack of clarity, the pack didn't notice it. Your position was never formally. My position was regent, she said, which the council recognized in writing in the 3rd month of the 1st year when Voss himself drafted the documentation. She paused. I have the copy. Voss's expression did not change. He was good at that. The question of what comes next, he said, redirecting smoothly, is one the Alpha King should determine. Yes, Kaelen said. It is. The room went quiet. He had not spoken since the formal matters, and the quality of his silence had been the kind that made people careful about filling it. Marin has governed this pack for 2 years, he said. She has done it well. The garrison is stronger. The border treaties are more favorable than the ones I left with, and the pack's wolves know her name and trust her judgment. He looked at Voss with the flat gray attention that she had learned could be used as a kind of pressure applied without force. The question of her position is not under review. The question of how we formalize what she has already built is one we will address, but not through a process of diminishment. Voss was quiet for a moment. The formal structures of pack law will be followed, Kaelen said. Appropriately. At the appropriate time, he looked around the table. Are there other matters? There were no other matters. The council filed out. Voss last, his expression still smooth, still careful, still the face of a man who was recalculating rather than retreating when the room was empty. Marin gathered her papers. Appropriately, at the appropriate time, she said without looking up. That's going to require a follow-up. I know. He'll push again within the week. I know that, too. She looked up. He was watching her with that expression again, the layered one, the one she didn't have a full name for yet. You said we, she said. When you talked about formalizing things, you said, we will address. I did. That's a significant word. Yes, he said, it is. She looked at him for a moment. Then she picked up her papers and walked out. She needed to think. She thought best when she was working. She spent the afternoon in the scriptorium, the same room where he had found her on the morning he left, the same desk, the same quality of light through the north-facing window, and she worked through a set of manuscript translations that had been waiting for her attention for 3 weeks. And she let the thinking happen in the background, the way it always did when she gave her hand something to do. The 2 years had changed her, she knew that. She had known it in the abstract for a while. But seeing him again had made it concrete, the way you understand the distance you've traveled only when you can see where you started from. She had arrived at Ironhold as something adjacent to a mate, bond, a connection that had been building for 8 months before he left, and had never been formally named. And she had stayed as something she didn't have a clean word for. Not a mate, not a regent in the traditional sense. something that had been built out of necessity and had become, over 2 years of showing up, something real. The pack knew it. The wolves knew it. Even Voss, in his careful political opposition, was responding to something he recognized as genuine authority, not just temporary arrangement. The question was whether Kaelen knew it, not the governance part. She believed him about the governance. The flat, precise declaration in the council session had been real. She could read him well enough to know the difference between a political statement and a true one, and that had been true. But the other part, the part that had been building for 8 months before he left and had continued building quietly in his absence, the way some things grow in the dark without needing to be tended. She filed it away. She finished the manuscript. He found her in the scriptorium again, just before evening. He didn't say anything at first. He came in and stood near the window, the way he had the night before, and she let him stand there while she finished the line she was translating. Then she set down her pen. "Sit down," she said. "You've been on your feet all day." He sat. Across from her, at the other end of the desk, in the chair that had been there for 8 months before he left and had stayed there since, the way things stay in the places they've been placed when no one has a reason to move them. "I went to my father's grave this afternoon," he said. "I know. Aldrich told me. You have a good information network." "I have a pack that talks to me," she said. "It's different." He was quiet for a moment. "What was he like at the end?" She told him. She told him plainly and without softening it, the way she thought he would want it. The second collapse, the night she had sat with him, the things he had said about Kaelen and about the pack and about the weight of a throne passed through blood. She told him about the burial, the ceremony, the words the pack law required, and the ones she had added because they had felt true. She watched his face as she spoke, and she saw the things moving in it, the jaw, the eyes, the particular quality of a man receiving information he had been holding space for without knowing what shape it would take. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "He asked for you," Kaelen said finally. "When I left, he told me. He said she knows how to hold things. He meant it as a practical observation. Yes." He looked at her. "But he also said it like it was the most important thing he could tell me." She held that for a moment. "He was a good man," she said. "He knew what mattered." "He knew before I did," Kaelen said. Quiet. Flat. The particular flatness that was not absence of feeling but the opposite, feeling held so carefully it had gone still. The lamp between them was burning steadily. Outside, the evening was coming down, the sky going the deep gray of early autumn dusk, and the courtyard below was lit by the torches she had kept burning for 2 years. "Tell me about the Eastern Coalition," she said. He looked at her. "You've been carrying it since you walked through the gate," she said, "and I'd been running this pack without knowing what you were doing for 2 years, I'd like to know," he told her. It took a long time. The Eastern Coalition had been more complicated than a single negotiation. It had been 3 separate territorial disputes, 2 succession crises in allied pacts, and 1 genuine military threat that had required him to be physically present in ways that had made communication impossible for months at a stretch. He told her about it the way he told her most things, flat, spare, precise. But she was listening for the spaces between the facts, the places where the 2 years were visible in what he chose to say and how he said it. He had been alone. Not in the logistical sense. He had had men with him, the 2 she had seen at the gate and others, but in the particular way that mattered, the way that had nothing to do with physical proximity. He had been making decisions without anyone who knew him well enough to push back on them, and she could hear in the way he described certain choices the particular quality of a man who had been operating without that friction for too long. "You should have had someone with you," she said when he finished. "I know. Someone who would tell you when you were wrong. I know that too." "Were you wrong?" "At any point?" A pause. "Once. The second succession crisis." I moved too fast, and it cost 3 weeks of ground we had to rebuild. What would you have done differently? Waited? Asked better questions before acting. He looked at her. You would have told me to wait, probably. Yes, he said. Probably. The silence that followed was the settled kind, the kind that happened between people who had gotten through the difficult part of a conversation and arrived somewhere quieter. Marin, he said. She waited. I left without naming what this was. He gestured between them, a small, precise motion. What we were. I left it unnamed because I told myself there wasn't time, and because naming things makes them real, and real things can be lost. He stopped, started again. My father's first mate died. Did you know that before my mother? There was someone before, and she died, and he spent 10 years not naming anything after that because he had learned that named things could be taken. She had not known that. She held it carefully. And you learned it from him, she said. I learned it from watching him. I didn't understand it as a lesson until I was already doing it. He looked at her steadily. I left you here with no title and no promise and no named thing to hold on to. And you held the pack together for 2 years and buried my father and made the garrison stronger and sat across from Voss every week and didn't flinch. He paused. I'm not asking you to forgive the leaving. I'm telling you I understand what it cost. She was quiet for a moment. It cost, she said. I won't tell you it didn't. I know. The first winter was. She stopped, chose a word. Hard, not the work. The work I could do. The not knowing was harder. Whether you were coming back, whether the thing I was holding it for was real or something I had decided was real because it was easier than the alternative. It was real, he said. I know that now. I knew it most of the time. There were nights I wasn't sure. She met his eyes. That's honest. Yes, he said. It is. I also need you to understand something, she said. I'm not the person who was standing at the gate when you left. I know that sounds like a warning, and it is. A little. But it's also just true. I've been running this pack. I've made decisions that were mine, not yours, and they were the right decisions, and I'm not going to step back from them because you've come home. Whatever we figure out going forward, it has to account for that. He looked at her for a long moment. I know, he said. I told you this morning. I said, we. You did. I meant it. I believed you, she said. That's why I'm still sitting here. Something shifted in his expression. More than a fraction this time, the controlled surface giving way to something underneath it, something that had been there a long time and had finally found the right moment to be visible. I should have named it before I left, he said. I should have told you what you were to me, what you are. He stopped. The jaw set. The eyes went to that particular quality of gray that she had learned over 2 years of his absence was the color of something he was holding very carefully. You are the thing I was coming back for. Not the pack, not the throne, not the garrison, you. And I didn't say it when I should have, and I spent 2 years in the Eastern Territories making decisions I would have made differently if I had said it, because named things are real, and real things give you something to lose. And I was afraid of losing it. The lamp burned between them. She looked at him for a long time. She was aware of the particular quality of the moment, the scriptorium, the evening light, the same desk where he had found her on the morning he left, the chair that had stayed in the same place for 2 years, as though it had been waiting. You're naming it now, she said. Yes? 2 years late? Yes. She was quiet for another moment. Then, I kept the fire in the great hall burning every night, because the pack needed to see it burning. She paused. I also kept it burning because I needed to see it burning, because it was the kind of thing you do when you're holding something for someone when you believe they're coming back. He was very still. That's not forgiveness, she said. That's just what was true. I'm telling you what was true. I'll take what was true, he said, quiet. I'll start there. She nodded. Once. Then she picked up her pen. Tomorrow morning, she said, before Voss makes his second move. We should talk about the formal structure, what you want to propose to the council, and how you want to frame it. We, he said. She looked up. Yes, we. She met his eyes. That's a significant word. You said so yourself. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, close enough. Tomorrow morning, he said. 8 o'clock, before he can arrive at 8:45. He stood, moved, toward the door, stopped Marin. She waited. Thank you, he said. For my father. For the garrison. For all of it. She held his gaze for a moment. Go to sleep, Kaelen, she said. He went. She sat at the desk for a while longer in the quiet of the scriptorium, and she let herself feel the particular shape of the evening. The weight of what had been said, the weight of what was still unsaid, the particular quality of something that had been held in suspension for 2 years and was now, slowly, carefully, beginning to settle. She replaced the oil in the lamp, then she went to bed. The formal ceremony happened on a Friday, 12 days after he returned. 12 days of early mornings and late evenings, and the careful, deliberate work of rebuilding the shape of things, not restoring them to what they had been before he left, because she had been serious about that. The thing she had built was not going to be unmade, but building forward from where they both were now, which was a different place than where they had started, he had learned to ask before deciding. She had learned to tell him when she disagreed, directly, without the diplomatic softening she had used in the early months when she had still been finding her footing. They had argued twice properly about the Eastern Treaty terms and about Voss, and both arguments had ended with better decisions than either of them would have reached alone. She had filed that away. The arguing. The way it felt like something functioning, correct. The ceremony was held in the great hall before the full council, and the senior pack members and the wolves who ran the borders, and the garrison. It was a formal proceeding under pack law, the naming of a co-authority, the binding of a partnership in governance, the public declaration that made a private truth visible. Voss was present, his expression carefully neutral, his political calculation already visible in the way he was watching the room rather than the ceremony. She stood next to Kaelen at the front of the hall. He spoke the words the pack law required. He spoke them flat and spare and without ornament, the way he spoke everything. But she had learned to hear the weight in the flatness, the way that for him precision was the form that care took. And then he said, in the same voice, words that were not in the pack law. She held this pack when I could not. She held it well. She held it as though it were her own, because it is. That is what I am naming today. Not a regent, not a temporary arrangement. What she is? The hall was very quiet. The wolves along the walls, the senior pack members, the border runners, old Aldrich from the southern pass, had gone still in the way she had learned to read, the collective held breath of a pack that was paying attention to something that mattered. Then Aldrich at the back of the hall bowed his head. The ripple moved outward from him, not the involuntary tide of a bond recognition, but something chosen, each wolf making the same decision, the pack's acknowledgement of something it had already known for 2 years and was now being given the words for. One by one, heads lowering, the hall going quieter and quieter as it happened, she held very still. She was aware that she was not going to cry, because she was not generally someone who cried in public. But she was also aware that this was the kind of moment that required all of her attention, and she gave it all of her attention, the full weight of it. The 2 winters and the council sessions, and the nights at the desk and the fire kept burning, all of it arriving here in this hall, in this moment being named. Kaelen turned to look at her. She met his eyes. Well, she said quietly, dry, the kind of dry that was its own form of tenderness, that took long enough. The corner of his mouth moved more than a fraction this time, almost the whole way. Yes, he said, it did. Later, much later, after the formal proceedings and the council's measured acknowledgments, and the pack members who had come to speak to her individually, Aldrich last, who had taken her hand in both of his and said nothing, but had said it very clearly. Later, they were in the great hall alone, the fire burning high, the evening settled around them. She was at the table with a cup of tea she had forgotten to drink. He was standing near the fire, which was where he stood when he was thinking. She had learned that, too, in the 12 days, the particular geography of his thinking, where he stood and what he did with his hands. Boss will request a formal meeting next week, she said. I know. He'll want to discuss the treaty terms. He'll use it as a way to reassert a position in the new structure. Let him request it, Kaelen said. We'll see him together. She looked up. Together, she said. Yes, he turned from the fire. That's how it works now. She looked at him for a long moment. The fire was behind him, casting the particular quality of light that made the hall feel like what it was. Old stone, old wood, the accumulated weight of a place that had been holding people for a long time. She had learned to love it. She had not expected to love it when she arrived, but she had. The way you love things you've worked hard to keep. You know, she said, for a man who spent 2 years not naming things, you've gotten very comfortable with the word together. I've had 12 days of practice, he said. That's not very long. No, he said, but I've been told I learn quickly when I apply myself. She looked at him. Who told you that? My father. Apparently, according to the woman who sat with him when he died. She held that for a moment. Then she picked up her tea, which was cold, and drank it anyway because it was something to do with her hands, while she decided what to say next. He was right, she said finally. You do. He came to the table and sat down across from her, in the chair that had been across from her desk for 2 years, the chair she had not moved because there was no reason to move it. He sat in it as though it had been waiting for him, which she supposed it had been, in the same way that most things in this fortress had been waiting. The fire, the chair, the woman at the desk who had kept everything running, and had not in 2 years once let herself consider that he might not come back. I'm going to be difficult sometimes, he said. I know that. I know that too, she said. I've been difficult twice in 12 days. We're even. You weren't difficult. You were right. Both things can be true. He looked at her. Yes, he said, they can. The fire crackled. Outside, the night had come down fully, the courtyard dark, except for the torches she had kept burning for 2 years and intended to keep burning, not out of habit now, but out of something that had become its own kind of choice. A deliberate warmth, a light kept on. Kaelen, she said. Yes, I'm glad you came back. He was quiet for a moment. I know, he said. I could tell from the way you finished the council session before coming to the gate. She looked at him. That was efficiency, not sentiment. It was both, he said. I know the difference. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she looked back at the fire. Tomorrow, she said, we should review the Eastern Treaty terms before Voss can frame them. I have notes. Of course you have notes. I've had 2 years to think about the Eastern Treaty terms. You've had 2 years to think about everything. Yes, she said. I have. She paused. It's going to take you a while to catch up. He looked at her with that expression, the one she still didn't have a full name for, the one that had been building since he walked through the gate in the rain, the one that was made of the 2 years and the 12 days, and the particular quality of sitting across from someone in a room you have both decided to stay in. I have time, he said. She nodded, one settled. Good, she said. Then we'll start with the Eastern Treaty. The fire burned, the hall held them. Outside, the torches were lit. She did not file that moment away for later examination. She let herself have it now. Pack. Here's what I want to know. Marin held Ironhold for 2 years, without a title, without a promise, without a named thing to hold on to, and she held it anyway, because that's who she was. Kaelen came back and had to earn what she had once been willing to give freely. That's a different kind of love story than the ones where the bond does all the work. This one required two people deciding, on purpose, to stay. Drop in the comments. Did Marin wait too long to demand her accounting, or did she time it exactly right? And if you know someone who would stay and hold the fire even when there's no guarantee of a return, share this with them. That's the rarest kind of person. They deserve a story. Until the next one, pack.